Well, I couldn't help but roll my eyes over this story in today's Daily Telegraph. Yesterday I spoke to Mark Latham about his new bill in the New South Wales Parliament to ban gender fluidity classes from New South Wales schools. And you'll remember we spoke to Bella de Brera about the insidious identity politics in our universities. Well, maybe it's no surprise that gender fluidity is now infesting architecture. Wait for it. Clover Moore, the lovely Mayor of Sydney, is now insisting that there will be no building permits for firms that don't pander to identity, gender, politics. In what is a daily reminder now of how destructive and wasteful this sort of rubbish is, the Sydney Mayor has decreed that any future CBD high-rise designs must employ, wait for it, at least 6 architectural firms with specific gender ratios: 40% male, 40% female, and 20% any gender. You can make of that what you will. Joining me to discuss just how bonkers all of this is City of Sydney Councillor Christine Forster. Christine, how are you?
Hi, Rowan.
Now, come on, this is just madness, isn't it? How on earth does your genitalia influence whether a building is going to fall over or not, whether it's built properly?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, it's one of these loony kind of hoops that Clover likes to make people jump through to meet her version of reality. I mean, the reality is that Clover is an anti-business, anti-development Lord Mayor, and the process that the council has been going through has simply been one of imposing more red tape, more prescription, more complexity around the planning systems that will govern what happens in the Sydney CBD for the next couple of decades. And this crazy idea that developers have to engage firms that have a gender... Well, it started off as gender equality. It started off as the proposal was 50% men, 50% women.
And then they couldn't figure that out. Help, we're being transphobic.
And I suppose that probably the architectural sector gave them some feedback that probably wasn't a realistic expectation. So now they've gone to this loopy kind of 40-40-20, which really effectively is saying that they're requiring firms to have a minimum 40% women. Which is, look, no bad thing. You know, in an ideal world, we would have 50% women and 50% men represented in every sector of business and life and culture. But it's just not a realistic proposition. Plainly, it wasn't when they proposed this to the development sector and architectural sector, so they've had to backtrack a bit.
Well, listen, last year the Times of India asked the critical question in modern architecture, which is, of course, why are so many buildings phallic-looking? They even suggested that a phallic structure symbolises strength, power, male domination and political authority. The Guardian, Christine, quickly picked up on this, and they went further, claiming that toxic masculinity is built into the fabric of our urban spaces, with the feminist author at The Guardian getting very agitated about upward-thrusting buildings and, well, people having dinner, so I'll leave the rest of it to their imagination. Christine, do you think Clover's been reading too many Times of India and Guardian articles, maybe?
Well, she's absolutely no fan of tall buildings, Rowan. You might remember how she was bitterly opposed to the development at Barangaroo, and look what we've got there now, a beautiful 270-odd metre architectural gift to the city, in my view, a fantastic building that will be a great legacy asset. She intransigently opposed and campaigned against the proposed new Ritz-Carlton Tower at the Star Casino, which would have beautifully bookended the other side of Darling Harbour with the Crown Tower. She doesn't like tall buildings. If it would have been up to the Lord Mayor, Barangaroo wouldn't exist as the great development it is now on the western side of the CBD. So she might have been reading some of that. But, reality is, in a constrained urban environment, you have to grow upwards. You can't continue to grow outwards, and that's why the state government is putting good new planning controls in across the whole metropolitan area to allow that to happen.
So on a serious note, if you're sticking up a building and you've got to choose company A from company B and company C and so on, what's the option? That the architects rush out and hire more women or more men or more trans, whatever they want to get to meet the gender requirements, and they all rush out and find the same people, and there's a limited number of architects. What happens? happens? Do you lose business, or do you put less talented people onto constructing the buildings and just hope that the concrete they pour is of a sufficient quality and that the designs are appropriate for withstanding some of Sydney's high winds, for example?
Well, look, that's the whole point, Rowan. I mean, the point of design excellence competitions is that we get the best outcome for the city. We get the best developments, we get the best designs, we get the best buildings. In any way, shape or form, if you start to restrict the people who can participate in that process, either from the development side because they can't afford to pay 6 competitive bidders $100,000 each, that's a very significant impost on a developer, or from the architect side because they can't meet the requirement to have 40% women in their design and leadership teams. It's not just the leadership team, it's the design teams as well. Then you're creating unnecessary barriers to entry. And what the city needs and wants, particularly in the years going forward as we try to emerge as best we can from the debilitating disruption of the pandemic, is to have it made easier for developers to come and build new developments, to redevelop old assets, to improve the infrastructure of the city generally. And if you're just putting barriers in people's way and excluding people, then you're not delivering the best outcome for the city.
Aren't we statistically, isn't Sydney behind in the statistics on development proposals and so on? Tell us about
badly. The 2019 figures that the state government put out show that it takes 205 days per development to have a development application approved in Sydney, compared with 75 days, 80 days in Melbourne and Brisbane. Now that means that the cities, the non-global cities in Australia, the global cities Sydney is competing with, are doing far better than we are, and that means they will attract businesses, they will attract corporate headquarters, they will attract investment, they will attract development dollars, redevelopment dollars, recycling infrastructure assets, and they will be beating us to the game.
And they won't be worried about what the genitalia is of the person drawing up the plans or designing. Christine Forster, thanks so much for coming on. Great to see you again, and keep fighting in the madhouse that is the mayoralty of Sydney.